Linda and Mary, was that Malium? Oh, Tamil, okay. You know me, always getting Malium and Tamil mixed up. I'm joking, I wouldn't know. Well, good morning, everybody. Great to see you here. Today we are continuing our series on the topic of anxiety and how ancient wisdom, if we let it, can transform our approach to it, the anxious experiences we have in this life. The passage we're studying in this series says this. You can read along with me on the screen if you wish. Do not be anxious about anything. How many of you have failed at that so far this morning? I have, both hands and feet in the air and everything. Do not be anxious about anything. But that's why we're here. We're learning how to be better at this. But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, friends, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard of me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. For those joining us for the first time today in this series, I promise that by the end of this series, you will be able to quote at least half of that, if not all of it, by heart. We're looking into this passage to see how not to get rid of anxiety, but how to deal with it when it comes, because it will come. In week 1, we took just an overview, an umbrella view of anxiety. The fundamental nature of it, how it roots itself in the what-ifs of life, and the illusion of control that we so desperately seek. In week number 2, we discovered how truth serves as our compass through anxious times. We looked at how, although our feelings are valid, they're not always a great representation of what's going on in reality. And when we bring truth to anxiety, it helps us to see things from the right perspective. And today, we're going to explore a word that has lost its meaning, its true meaning in history. That is the word noble or nobility. Paul tells us to, in addition to truth, in addition to understanding anxiety, to also have noble thoughts and to be noble people. But what does that really mean? And more importantly, what should it mean to us here in this place today? The word noble has an interesting history. It reflects the evolution of social values and language and meaning. It comes from the Latin nobilis. Can you say that? Nobilis. You are Homo Nobilis. What does that mean? You are a noble human. It originally meant, this word, to be well known, to be known for something. But known for what? Well, it was a word that was used to label someone who was well known for their good deeds, for their good standing in society. Someone who is excellent in character or worthy of recognition. If I had to define it myself, I would say that nobility chooses the greater good over self-interest, treats everyone with respect, and puts others before themselves. That's what it originally meant to be noble. However, in the Middle Ages, after Rome fell, the meaning of this word shifted drastically. The ruling classes of the time gradually transformed this word noble from a description of earned moral excellence into, wait for it, a hereditary title. Something that you just got because you were born. Privilege in every sense of the word. This wasn't just a linguistic shift in the Middle Ages. It was an attempt to legitimize privilege by cloaking it in the language of virtue. This is why in everyday speech, when we refer to people as nobles or nobility, are you thinking about some guy on the street that's very nice to everybody but doesn't have a home? No. We think of people that live in mansions, people that live in castles. And that's just not what this word is referring to. History provides us with powerful contrasting examples of true nobility versus false humility, or humility as it got defined later. The word noble says this about people. Nelson Mandela chose reconciliation over revenge. After 27 years of imprisonment, he exited that prison with an even better heart, an even better outlook on life, an even greater desire for the African people to experience unity. Mother Teresa lived and worked and died in humble service to people who could never return the favor. Despite world recognition, there wasn't a single person on earth that didn't know who Mother Teresa was. And she lived in the slums. Mahatma Gandhi responded to violence with peaceful resistance in the Indian independence movement, ultimately giving his life for his principles. Gandhi also inspired his methods, his outlook called ahimsa, which is a word that means nonviolence. I think that is Hindi, correct? Ahimsa? Yes. Which means nonviolence. Dr. King picked up on that, and it became part of the civil rights movement here in the United States. But what about those who hijacked the meaning of this word? King Henry VIII, Gary, no offense, abandoned his principles for self-interest. He executed 2 of his wives. Wow! Nicholas II, the Tsar, lived in luxury that you cannot possibly imagine, while his people were facing severe hardship. Marie Antoinette, everyone heard of her? When we think of her, we think of a guillotine, right? Marie Antoinette, she lived a life in splendor while her people were literally starving. We have all had elementary level world history classes in this room when we went to school. And let me ask you a question this morning. According to history, think back through your history classes. Did the Apostle Paul write this passage before the Middle Ages or after the Middle Ages? Say it out if you know it. Before, that's right. So is Paul using the redefined version of this word, noble? Is he using the Middle Ages word of this word noble, or the original one? He's using the original one. So when Paul writes the words, think on whatever is noble, he's writing of nobility in its original form, not its redefined form. He's writing about a word that is not entangled with social status. He is calling us to fill our minds in times of anxiety, to fill our minds with thoughts about the greater good, treating everyone with dignity and respect, and serving others before we serve ourselves. Why does that help us be less anxious? I'll tell you why. Thank you for asking. It's because in moments of anxiety, our minds are always spiraling inward instead of outward. We fixate on these impossible standards we have for ourselves. The gap between our expectations and what's actually really happening in life. We obsess over our perceived shortcomings and the capabilities that we lack and the milestones that are unmet. Achievements still beyond our reach after so many years. But true nobility calls us to look outward, even in our struggles. It transforms anxiety from a solitary burden we carry into a communal one that we share. It invites us to see that our personal battles are chances for each of us to choose better ways of living. And when we each do that, we start finding that we're living in a less anxious world. By giving ourselves to noble thoughts and acting on them, we start to discover more peace between us. We start to experience more meaning and purpose in this life. Why? Because we're not making it all about us. When anxiety threatens to overwhelm us, this truth becomes our anchor. As we focus on embodying true nobility, on simply being known in our world for goodness, we're participating in something greater than ourselves. The world would like you to believe, the world would like me to believe, that less anxiety in this world is found by having a certain person in office or certain people in Congress or a certain boss at your job or a certain circle of friendships in your social circles. But that is a redefining of life altogether. Our purpose is to live, as Paul wrote later in the New Testament, quiet lives full of holiness and sincerity. If everybody on the bottom started doing that, things might change at the top. We think that's where it happens. But the people that are at the top are only a reflection of our anxiety, unfortunately, so much of the time. What if we flip that? I have this little plaque up here with me today. And I've had this in my office for a long time, and I have a dream for this plaque. What so many of you might not know, but before I moved here and started serving as your pastor, this was about 9 or 10 years ago. Church in Bethesda was getting ready to close. It just was not happening. There weren't a lot of people coming. The giving was low, and there were bills in this ancient structure that we couldn't keep up with. And this idea was presented to the congregation, and this young man interrupted the conversation, and he said, "You can't close this church. This is my family's church. We've been here forever." And he's not a kid anymore, but that kid was Michael Arevba over here. And Jan Fox, she and Sully are, I'm so angry at them. They're in Florida today. Jan was deeply moved by that. And so she and Sully began to formulate a plan so that church in Bethesda could stay open. And they got a group of people together, and I have their names here. Jan, of course, Gary Kuntz and Margaret, who was his partner, which was still living at the time. Sully, Jan's partner in crime. Michael Arevba, of course. David and Penny Yao. And Victor Williams, he now lives in the middle of nowhere in West Virginia. We can't find him, but he's down there somewhere. And it says, "We are grateful to you for keeping the blue doors open." The church was planning to close, not considering it, but planning it. Does that sound like an anxious thing to you? It does to me. It did to Michael. But instead of everybody being anxious and just going their own separate ways in self-preservation, they came together and said, well, I can do this little bit. And this person said, I can do this little bit. I can do this little bit. And this is before my time here. Before you know it, people started coming back to church in Bethesda. And things started moving upward again. This is how we must function in anxiety. It's what it is to be noble. It's good people connecting with other good people so that with their combined efforts, they can make for a better world. But it can't be done alone. It takes a community. It takes friends. It takes trusting others. And not only that, it's not about just believing those things, it's actually about acting on them. I kept the blue doors that were on the front of the church here, but we had to have them replaced because they were literally falling off the hinges. But they are sitting down in our basement right now, and I have this dream on that wall over there to hang those 4 doors and put this plaque by them to remind each and every one of us when we walk into this room that that's how the world gets better, is by gathering together in groups of like-minded people to keep doors open rather than close them. And by the way, if you would like to help with that, if I try to hang them there myself, a child is going to get injured. But if you know how to do that kind of stuff, see me after church. I'll give you whatever you need to hang those doors. But as we wrap up this second week in the series, I want to ask you to really think about this week. Let it bother you a little bit. Ask yourself the question, am I doing good things in my life to be seen? Or am I doing them because they're the right thing to do? Good stuff gets done either way. But when we're doing it to be seen, it's all about us. When we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, it's like this bug light that draws others in without killing them, of course. It's like this light that people want to be near and want to be a part of. And this is one of the ways that we reduce our anxiety levels in life. By realizing that we're not bad people trying to be good, we're good people that are often plagued with thoughts of being bad. And all we have to do is be who we really are. That part of us that shakes hands and smiles and asks about other people's lives, helps people that we see out in the world that are struggling. If we all do that, we win. Let's pray.